Chapter 1. The Returning Mourning Scarf. The village had always been shrouded in silence whenever the sound of the mourning drum echoed from the hills. That day was no different. Clouds pressed low, the air thick and heavy with the stench of burning incense. Every house shut its doors tightly, and not a single child dared to run around the mossy yards. On the altar of Min's grandmother's house, a mourning scarf was still hanging. The white fabric had long turned gray, its threads frayed, but strangely it remained intact despite the passing of decades. Min had returned for the funeral. His heart weighed down the moment he stepped into the room where his grandmother once lived. He felt a sudden chill. Though no wind blew, he raised his eyes to the scarf and froze. The mourning scarf trembled lightly, as if someone had just touched it. Its fabric swayed gently, then slowly stretched, forming a faint line of red, like blood soaking through. Startled, Min stumbled back. The oil lamp on the altar flickered, nearly going out. In that dim moment, Min thought he saw a figure, a bride dressed in white. Her head wrapped in a mourning scarf, standing silently in the corner of the room. Her face was obscured, but from the dark space beneath the scarf came a chilling sensation, as though two hollow eyes were staring directly into his soul. Min's breathing grew ragged. He shut his eyes tight, and when he opened them again, the room was empty, quiet, save for the faint sound of the mourning scarf swaying gently in the still air. And then, in the silence, a whisper like a sigh drifted past his ears. Another one must die. Chapter 2. The Funeral Night. The funeral for Min's grandmother stretched into the night. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, thick smoke curling in every corner. The mournful sound of drums pounded, blending with the sharp, sorrowful wails of horns. Relatives and neighbors sat in silence, their faces pale, lit only by the flickering light of oil lamps. Min knelt in front of the coffin, the white scarf tied around his forehead weighing down on him like a curse. The moment the ritual chanting began, he felt a wave of cold creep up his spine. His fingers trembled, his heart pounding wildly as though anticipating something unspeakable. From outside the yard came the rustling sound of footsteps. Min turned his head, but only saw a thick blanket of fog rolling in. The dogs in the village howled simultaneously, then fell into sudden silence. When the ritual reached its peak, the mourning scarf on the altar began to stir. It swayed gently at first, then violently, though no wind blew through the closed room. Several elders noticed and whispered prayers under their breath, their hands shaking. Suddenly, the flame of the oil lamp flared, then dimmed. In that fleeting instant, Min saw a shadow in a white bridal dress glide past the window. The fabric dragged heavily on the ground, leaving behind a dark, wet trail. The chanting faltered. Everyone froze, sensing the unnatural cold. Min's uncle hurried to pour more oil into the lamp, but the flame continued to flicker weakly, as if smothered by invisible breath. And then, amidst the haze of incense, came a sound that froze Min's blood, the sound of weeping. Faint at first, then louder, echoing through the courtyard. It was not the cry of mourners, but a woman's cry, sharp and heart-wrenching, the cry of someone who had died but refused to rest. The white mourning scarf trembled violently, then stretched long, as though about to reach down and wrap itself around someone's neck. Min fell forward, his forehead hitting the cold stone floor. In that moment, he heard a whisper, right beside his ear. "The bride has returned." Chapter 3. The Old Man's Warning. The following morning, the funeral ended, but the heavy air lingered. The villagers dispersed quietly, their eyes avoiding Min, as though he carried something unclean. Min, unable to shake off the unease from the night before, sought out Old Man Hack, the oldest man in the village, known for his knowledge of old tales. The old man sat under a withered banyan tree, his back hunched, eyes cloudy and dim, but sharp enough to pierce through the fog of years. When Min approached and hesitantly spoke about what he had seen, the shadow in white, the weeping, the moving mourning scarf, the old man's expression darkened immediately. He gripped Min's wrist with bony fingers, his voice trembling. "You must not speak of it carelessly. Once you've seen it, you've been chosen." Min frowned. "Chosen? What do you mean?" The old man's gaze wandered toward the direction of the graveyard. His voice dropped, as though afraid the wind itself would carry his words away. "Long ago, there was a bride. She died on her wedding night. strangled by her own mourning scarf. They say her soul never found rest. Since then, the scarf appears again and again in this village, seeking the living to take with it. Min's throat tightened. He wanted to laugh it off, but the memory of the weeping, the cold, the shadow, none of it felt like mere superstition. Old Man Hack continued, his voice harsher. It feeds on grief. It wraps around those who look at it, binding them, one by one. It drags them down into the grave. You must never meet its gaze, or it will show you your death before it takes you. Min shivered. His mind returned to the moment at the altar, when he thought he saw hollow eyes staring at him from beneath the scarf. The old man released his wrist, sighing heavily. If it has marked you, your only hope is to pray it takes someone else first. But beware, boy, every death it claims is only a step closer to your turn. The wind picked up, rustling the banyan's roots like whispers. Min bowed quickly, heart pounding, then left. Yet even as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was trailing behind him, dragging a long piece of fabric through the dirt. Chapter 4. The First Night Alone. That night, Min stayed alone in his grandmother's old house. The funeral was over. The relatives had gone, leaving the ancient wooden house creaking in silence. Outside, the crickets cried endlessly, but inside, the air was thick and suffocating, heavy with the lingering scent of incense. Min lay down on the bamboo bed, an oil lamp glowing faintly at his side. He told himself that everything he had seen, the shadow, the scarf, the whispers, were just hallucinations from grief and exhaustion. But his heart refused to calm. The clock struck midnight. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside his room. Thump, thump, slow, dragging steps, as if someone barefoot was making their way closer and closer. Min froze, straining his ears. He sat up, sweat dripping down his back. The footsteps stopped right outside his door. He swallowed hard, then whispered to himself, "Just the wind, only the wind." Gathering what little courage he had, Min crept to the door and pressed his ear against it. Nothing, only silence. He exhaled shakily and turned back. Bang! The window shutters flew open with a crash. A gust of icy wind blasted through the room, extinguishing the lamp. In the moonlight, Min saw it, a mourning scarf, fluttering in midair. It wasn't hanging from anything. It simply floated, as if wrapped around an invisible head. The scarf drifted toward him. Inch by inch, Min stumbled backward, his legs trembling. The fabric swelled and contracted, as though it was breathing. From within the folds of cloth came a faint sobbing. The sound grew sharper, harsher, turning into a wail that pierced his ears. Min clapped his hands over them, but the sound seemed to come from inside his skull. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sobbing stopped. The scarf hovered right in front of him. Slowly, deliberately, it tilted, as if bowing its unseen head to look straight into Min's eyes. A cold hand, wet, clammy, landed on his shoulder. He couldn't move, his body locked in place, breath frozen, and in the stillness, a voice whispered, close and venomous, "You cannot escape?" Chapter 5. The Bride by the Graveyard. The following evening, Min forced himself to be braver. He told himself that what he had seen the previous night was nothing but an illusion, a trick of the mind. Still, his nerves were stretched thin, and every sound of rustling leaves or creaking wood made his heart skip. Around midnight, unable to endure the suffocating silence inside the house, Min stepped outside. The moon was pale, half hidden behind drifting clouds. Mist lay heavy over the fields, rolling in waves like a ghostly sea. Min walked along the narrow dirt path leading to the village graveyard. His feet felt leaden, yet an unexplainable force seemed to push him onward. When he arrived, the mist thickened, curling between the crooked tombstones, making them look like shadowy figures bowing their heads. Then he saw her. At the edge of the graveyard stood a woman in white. Her bridal dress trailed across the wet earth, soaking up the damp soil. On her head, a mourning scarf hung loosely, its white fabric stained faintly with red. She stood utterly still, her back slightly hunched, as though waiting for someone. The mist swirled around her, but her silhouette was sharp, undeniable. Min's breath caught in his throat. His body told him to run, but his legs would not move. He could only stare, frozen. Slowly, the woman turned her head. Beneath the scarf, There was no face, only a hollow void. Black and bottomless. From that emptiness came a sound. First a low moan. Then a shriek of grief that rattled through the graveyard, echoing off the stones. The ground beneath Min's feet trembled. He staggered back, tripping over a root. When he looked up again, the woman was gone. Only the mist remained, curling and twisting in unnatural shapes. But just as he turned to flee, a voice rose behind him, soft yet chillingly close. "Do you remember me?" Chapter 6. The Whisper of the Scarf. That night, Min returned home with his heart still pounding. He locked the doors, bolted the windows, and lit every lamp he could find. Yet no matter how brightly the house glowed, the shadows seemed thicker, pressing closer against the walls. He sat on the bamboo bed, clutching the quilt tightly. His ears buzzed with the echo of the woman's voice by the graveyard. "Do you remember me?" The words clung to him, as though etched into his bones. Hours dragged by. The oil lamps flickered lower. Just as Min began to feel his eyelids grow heavy, a sudden chill swept the room. The flame bent violently, as if pushed by invisible breath. And then he heard it. A faint rustle, like fabric brushing the floor. Min stiffened. His gaze darted toward the altar. The mourning scarf hung there, motionless, but the sound continued, growing louder, closer, until it circled around him. Min's breath quickened. He whispered to himself, "It's nothing, nothing." But then, the scarf swayed. Not from wind, there was none. It swayed like something alive, tugged by unseen hands. Slowly, it unraveled, the end of the fabric sliding down toward the floor, creeping inch by inch across the tiles. The fabric brushed against Min's ankle. Cold, wet, sticky, as though soaked in blood. He recoiled, kicking at it, but the scarf slithered higher, coiling like a snake around his leg. A whisper rose, soft and mournful, yet close to his ear though no lips formed the words. "You are mine?" Min screamed, thrashing wildly. The scarf tightened, leaving red welts around his skin. He grabbed a knife from the table and slashed at it. The blade cut through nothing, only air. The fabric vanished. Gasping, Min looked around. The scarf was back on the altar, hanging still, as though it had never moved. But on his leg, the bruised marks of strangling fabric burned like fire. And in the silence that followed, the whisper returned, fading into the walls, into the night. "Do not resist, you belong to me." Chapter 7. The Endless Funeral. That night, after returning from the graveyard, Min could not sleep. The image of the mourning scarf floating in the fog, the cold hand gripping his shoulder, and the ghostly whispers clung to him like a suffocating weight. He lay in bed, eyes wide, staring at the dark ceiling. His breath came short, as if an invisible rope was tightening around his neck. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him into a restless sleep. But it was not peace that awaited him. Min dreamed he was standing on a dirt road that stretched endlessly into the night. Around him, only torches flickered, their weak light illuminating a procession of pale figures. It was a funeral march. Hundreds of people, dressed in white mourning clothes, heads wrapped in scarves, walked silently in a long, endless line. But Min's heart froze when he realized they had no faces. Only hollow voids beneath the scarves. Black and empty. The mournful drums thundered, horns wailed in a discordant dirge. And all the while, the faceless mourners shuffled forward, step by step. Min looked down and gasped. He, too, wore a mourning robe, a scarf pressed against his forehead. Heavy, suffocating. The road carried him toward a coffin standing in the middle of an open field. 4 faceless pallbearers waited, nodding for him to approach. The lid creaked open. Inside lay a corpse. Min leaned closer, and his blood froze. It was himself. His own body lay there, eyes wide open, glassy, lifeless, a mourning scarf wrapped tightly around his head, soaked in blood. He stumbled back in horror. But the mourners closed in, surrounding him. They lifted their heads, and beneath each scarf were only hollow black pits. A wail erupted, hundreds of ghostly voices screaming at once. Grief and rage intertwined. The scarf on Min's head in the dream tightened suddenly. He clawed at it, gasping, his throat crushed, his vision blurring. The drums beat faster, harder, until his chest felt ready to burst. And then a whisper, sharp and cold, filled his ear. "You belong to me now?" Min jolted awake, drenched in sweat. His chest heaved as he gasped for air. But horror clawed through him when he saw the pillow beside his head. There lay the mourning scarf, damp and cold, as though freshly soaked in blood. Chapter 8. The First Death. The next morning, the entire village was thrown into chaos by terrible news. Hung, the friend who had accompanied Minh to the graveyard that night, was found dead in his locked room. The rumor spread like wildfire, shrouding the village in dread heavier than the funeral incense. Minh rushed over. The small house was crowded with people, their faces pale, whispering in fear. The stench of blood filled the air, sharp and suffocating. When the crowd parted, Minh froze in horror. Hung sat slumped against the wall, his eyes wide open, but his sockets were empty. Hollow, oozing thick, red fluid, his mouth hung open as though mid-scream, but his throat was clogged with congealed blood. Around his neck was the mourning scarf. It had strangled him so tightly that the flesh was bruised purple. The once white cloth was soaked crimson, dripping onto his chest. When villagers tried to remove it, the fabric resisted, tightening as if an invisible hand still pulled at it. They eventually cut at it with a knife, but the moment the blade touched, the scarf shuddered violently and sprayed fresh blood, sending everyone fleeing in terror. An elderly woman whispered with trembling lips, "Another one, it has taken another one." Minh's mind reeled. He remembered clearly, the night in the graveyard. Hung had mockingly placed the scarf on his head, laughing, dismissing it as a silly superstition. Now he was dead, his soul seemingly ripped from his body. But the most chilling thing of all was in the corner of the room. In the dim light, Minh could still see the mourning scarf. It wasn't on Hung anymore. It floated slightly, swaying gently in the still air, as if breathing. And then, through the panicked cries of the villagers, Minh heard it, close. Too close. A whispering laugh, thin and sharp. A woman's voice dragged up from the grave. "One life has been taken." Chapter 9. Bloodstains on white cloth. After Hung's gruesome death, the village sank into an even heavier silence. No one dared step near his house. Whispers spread from door to door, people muttering about curses, while others locked themselves inside before nightfall. But Minh could not rest. Hung's hollow eyes, the blood-soaked scarf, the whispers, everything replayed in his head. An endless nightmare. That evening, Minh sat in his grandmother's old room. The sky outside was thick with storm clouds, and the wind howled through the bamboo groves, sounding like mournful cries. The oil lamp flickered weakly, casting sickly yellow light against the cracked walls. Then he noticed the mourning scarf. It still hung on the altar, but it was no longer gray and faded. Streaks of fresh blood spread across it, dark and wet, dripping slowly onto the floor. Minh froze, unable to move. He watched as drop after drop hit the cold tiles. But the blood didn't soak into the ground. Instead, it spread outward, forming winding patterns like threads. The threads twisted and joined together, taking shape, a hand. The bloody hand dragged itself across the floor, leaving smeared stains as it crept toward Minh. The long, skeletal fingers twitched as if reaching for his ankle. Terrified, Minh tried to back away, but his legs felt nailed to the ground. His breath came in ragged bursts, his skin clammy with sweat. The hand stopped right before him, trembling, as though inviting him to take it. The stench of blood filled the room, thick and nauseating. Then the lamp suddenly went out. In the choking darkness, Minh heard a whisper right inside his ear. "The blood is not enough, it must flow again." A freezing wind swept through, raising the hairs on his neck. When Minh lit a match with trembling hands, his heart nearly stopped. The scarf had fallen from the altar. It was no longer still, it crawled across the floor like a snake, twisting and writhing toward him. Minh screamed and stumbled back against the wall. The bloody hand had vanished, but the stain remained, stretching like a rope, connecting the scarf directly to his feet. He kicked wildly, desperate to break free, but the crimson thread pulled tighter, binding him. And from the darkness, the woman's voice came again, this time sharper, closer, right behind him. "You cannot run?" Chapter 10. The figure in the photographs. After the terrifying night when the scarf slithered across the floor like a living serpent, Minh was left exhausted, his mind frayed. But the horror did not stop there. The next morning, while searching through his grandmother's belongings to distract himself, Minh discovered an old photo album. Its leather cover was cracked, Its pages yellowed, and a thick layer of dust clung to it. He opened it with trembling fingers. The photographs inside were faded: family gatherings, festivals, funerals. Most were blurred with age. But one detail froze Min's blood. In a picture from his grandmother's recent funeral, Min saw himself standing among his relatives. But just behind him stood a woman in white, her head wrapped in a mourning scarf. Her face was completely hidden. Min's throat tightened. He turned the page. Another funeral photo, this time from years ago. At his grandfather's burial. Again, there she was, the same woman, standing just behind him. His hands shook as he flipped faster. Frantic, every photograph of a funeral, stretching back to when Min was just a child, had her in it, sometimes far in the background, sometimes close, always the same, always behind him. His chest constricted, cold sweat dripping down his spine. He told himself it was impossible, that it must be a trick of light, or a forgotten relative, but his gut screamed otherwise. Finally, he reached the last page. Min's breath stopped. In the final photo, the woman was no longer behind him. She stood directly in front of the camera, facing it. Her face was hidden beneath the scarf, but Min could feel her gaze piercing him from the void beneath the fabric. Her white dress was splattered with blood. Worst of all, her skeletal hands were outstretched, reaching toward him. A gust of wind blew, scattering the photos across the floor. Min scrambled to pick them up, but when he looked down, he gasped. Every single photo now showed the woman. The room grew darker, the oil lamp sputtering. Min clutched the album, his body trembling. Then he realized with horror, in the final page, the woman was gone, and from just behind him came a cold, wet breath. A whisper brushed his ear. "I have always been here." Chapter 11. The Empty Hallway. That night, Min decided he would not sleep. He lit the oil lamp on his desk and sat upright, eyes fixed on the cracked walls. The ticking of the old clock in the shrine echoed through the silence, each sound like the pounding of a funeral drum. Outside, the wind howled through the bamboo, rattling the wooden shutters. The front door creaked, as if invisible hands were tugging at it rhythmically. The air was heavy, pressing on Min's chest with every breath. Near midnight, he heard it. Thump, thump. Footsteps, slow, dragging, echoing down the hallway outside his room. His blood ran cold. The sound grew closer, deliberate, until it stopped right at his door. Min gripped the oil lamp with trembling hands and crept toward the door. He pressed his hand against the latch. His breath caught in his throat. The footsteps ceased. Silence. Gathering what little courage he had, he cracked the door open. The hallway stretched into darkness, the dim light of the lamp barely illuminating the mold-stained walls. Nothing. Empty silence. But when his gaze shifted toward the far end of the hall, he froze. Hanging from the rotting wall was a mourning scarf. It dangled as though nailed into the wood, swaying gently though the air was still. It pulsed faintly, expanding, contracting, like the lungs of something alive. Breathing. Min's body went rigid, terror locking his joints. His throat tightened as his heart pounded painfully. And then, a drop fell. Dark red liquid dripped from the scarf, splattering on the wooden floor. Another drop, then another. The sound echoed in the silence. Suddenly, footsteps resumed, thump, thump, but this time, they came from behind Min. A cold breath touched the back of his neck. He couldn't turn, his body frozen solid, his skin prickled with dread, every nerve screaming. From the end of the hallway came a wail, high-pitched and drawn out, like grief stretched to breaking. "You must wear it." Chapter 12. The Legend of the Bride. The next morning, Min sought out Old Man Hack once again. The memory of the swaying scarf in the hallway, the whisper that demanded he wear it, still gnawed at his mind. The old man sat on the porch of his decaying house, a rosary trembling in his wrinkled fingers. Smoke from burning incense curled thickly around him, clinging to his gray hair. His cloudy eyes shifted toward Min as he approached. Min hesitated, then asked about the scarf. Old Man Hack fell silent. For a long while, only the sound of the wind rustling through the bamboo filled the air. Finally, his voice cracked as he spoke. "Do you know why this village is cursed? Why the young die so often? It is because of that scarf. It carries the soul of a bride who died unjustly, and her story has haunted us for generations. The old man's voice dropped to a whisper as he began to tell the tale. Long ago, a poor orphan girl was promised in marriage to the son of a wealthy family. The villagers rejoiced, and her wedding night was filled with drums and music. But as the bridal procession reached the groom's house, a scream tore through the air. When the door was forced open, the sight inside was unspeakable. The young bride hung lifeless, strangled by her own mourning scarf. Her eyes bulged with rage, her mouth twisted in eternal grief. Rumors spread that the groom had killed her. He already loved another woman, but greed for her dowry drove him to marry her anyway. That night, he used the mourning scarf to strangle her, smearing her wedding gown with blood. The next day, the scarf vanished, but soon after, nightmares plagued the villagers. They saw the bride standing at their doorsteps, heard her weeping in the night, and one by one, people died mysteriously, each found with a scarf tied tightly around their neck. Every few years, it returns, the old man muttered, eyes unfocused. It chooses someone, once chosen. There is no escape. Min's stomach twisted. He thought of Hung's death, of the footsteps in the hallway, of the whispers at his ear. All of it connected, forming a dreadful picture. Old man Hack leaned closer, his breath ragged. Last night, I heard her walking through the village. Her sobs echoed all the way to the communal yard. I fear she has chosen you. Min's blood ran cold. His pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to deny it, but in that moment, from the corner of the porch, a faint laugh rose, the shrill, broken laugh of a bride buried in endless resentment. Chapter 13. The Escape. After hearing Old Man Hack's dreadful tale, Min could no longer bear it. The thought that he had been chosen, marked by the cursed bride, gnawed at him relentlessly. That very afternoon, he packed a few clothes into a bag and fled, boarding the first bus back to the city, praying that distance would break the curse. The bus rattled along the muddy road, cutting through rice fields scattered with graves. Rain pattered against the windows, blurring the world outside. Min leaned his head against the seat, telling himself again and again, once I leave, it will end. But when the bus stopped to let passengers on and off, Min glanced out through the rain-streaked glass and froze. In the middle of the misty field stood a figure, a woman in a white dress, her head wrapped in a mourning scarf. She did not move, but her empty, hollow eyes seemed fixed directly on him. Min blinked, rubbed his eyes desperately. When he looked again, the figure was gone. His chest tightened with dread. Back in the city, Min locked himself inside his small apartment. The walls were white, the desk cluttered with books, the familiar space a small comfort. He locked the door, drew the curtains, and switched on every light, as if brightness alone could keep her away. That night, Min tried to sleep, but a chill woke him near midnight. He opened his eyes to see, on the pillow beside his head, the mourning scarf. It lay folded neatly, damp, as though fresh from rain, and it reeked of iron, of blood. Min screamed, flung it across the room, but when he turned back, it was there again, lying exactly where it had been. Panicked, he stumbled into the bathroom, splashed water onto his face, and lifted his head to the mirror. His reflection stared back, wide-eyed, shaking, but then his heart stopped. In the mirror, he no longer saw himself. He saw a man in mourning clothes, his head bound tightly with the scarf, his face pale as death, tears of blood streaming down his cheeks. Min spun around. Behind him, there was nothing but the tiled wall. But in the mirror, the reflection remained, smiling. With a strangled cry, Min smashed the glass. Shards clattered across the floor, catching the harsh light, but on every fragment, his reflection still stared back, wearing the scarf, bleeding, mouthing the same words over and over. You cannot run? Chapter 14. The Second Death. Ever since returning to the city, Min lived in suffocating dread. No matter where he went, the mourning scarf appeared, in the wardrobe, beneath the bed, draped across the chair. Each time he threw it away, it came back, damp, cold, reeking of blood. One afternoon, his relative, Uncle Fuck, came to visit, a hardened man who scoffed at superstition. He listened to Min's trembling story with a mocking laugh. When he saw the scarf lying on the table, he sneered, just a piece of old cloth. Watch me burn it. Before Min could stop him, Uncle Fuck snatched the scarf, strode into the yard, and lit a torch. The white fabric caught fire quickly. flames curling high. Minh felt a sudden, suffocating cold sweep through, as though hundreds of souls shrieked in agony. The fire roared unnaturally bright. Uncle Fuck laughed. Proud. See? That's all it is. But his laugh broke off. His body convulsed. His eyes rolled back. His throat rattled with a horrible choking sound. The burning scarf did not turn to ash. Instead, its fabric blackened, streaked with crimson, then burst free of the flames. It flew through the air like a living serpent, wrapping around Uncle Fuck's neck. He screamed, but the sound was strangled as the cloth tightened. Blood sprayed from his mouth, splattering across the tiles. His body jerked violently, then collapsed, twitching, but it did not end there. The scarf forced its way into his gaping mouth, shoving deeper, choking him. The fabric slid down his throat, wet and glistening with blood, until it seemed he was swallowing the scarf whole. His body spasmed, then went limp, eyes bulging with terror. Minh stumbled backward, horrified. The fire crackled, the torch still burning on the ground. The scarf slipped free from the corpse's mouth and rose into the air. Pristine once more, swaying gently in the cold wind. And then, a laugh echoed, a sharp, high-pitched laugh like a funeral trumpet. Mocking, triumphant. The blood is not enough. Chapter 15. The Walking Scarf. After Uncle Fuck's horrific death, Minh lived like a shadow of himself. His apartment reeked of incense and dried blood, the walls closing in like a tomb. Every night, he heard the faint rustle of cloth trailing behind him, though whenever he turned, nothing was there. That stormy night, rain lashed the windows, thunder cracked the sky. Minh lay on his bed, eyes wide, unable to sleep. Then it came, the sound of sobbing. Not outside, not down the hall, but right beneath his bed. His heart froze. He leaned over, peering into the darkness. From the shadows, a length of white fabric slid out, slithering across the floor like a snake. The mourning scarf. It writhed, dragging itself forward, leaving a streak of blood in its wake. Minh scrambled back, knocking over the lamp. He grabbed a broom and thrust it forward, trying to push the cloth away. But the scarf coiled around the broomstick, then shot upward, wrapping around his arm with terrifying speed. He screamed, flailing, but the scarf slipped free and dropped to the ground. Then it moved again, inch by inch, crawling toward the bed. Minh leapt onto the mattress, clutching his chest as his breath came in sharp gasps. The scarf slithered up the bedpost, sliding beneath the blanket. Minh felt it brush against his legs, cold, wet, sticky. It coiled tightly around his calves, then climbed higher, constricting his body. He clawed at it, but the more he struggled, the tighter it squeezed. The fabric wrapped around his chest, then his throat, cutting off his air. His vision blurred, stars bursting in his eyes. Just before he blacked out, a whisper rasped into his ear, damp and chilling. "Let me take your place." The scarf loosened suddenly, falling limp to the floor. Minh collapsed onto the bed, gasping, his throat burning with the deep red marks of strangulation. But the nightmare was not over. The scarf twitched on the ground. Slowly, impossibly, it rose upright, its folds twisted, shaping crude legs. It tottered forward like a newborn creature, staggering, learning to walk. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and Minh saw it clearly. From between the frayed threads of the scarf, an eye opened, blood red, unblinking, staring straight at him. Chapter 16. The Sealed Room. After witnessing the scarf crawl upright like a living thing, Minh no longer dared to close his eyes. His apartment felt like a coffin, every corner breathing with the presence of something unseen. On the third night after Uncle Fuck's death, Minh dragged his belongings into a small back room at the end of the hallway. The room was barely used, its walls damp and mold-streaked, its single window nailed shut with rotten planks. Only a faint glow seeped through the cracks. Minh told himself this sealed space, with no way in or out, might keep him safe. At first, the silence calmed him. He sat curled on the narrow bed, staring at the closed door. Outside, rain tapped against the roof, steady and monotonous. But near 2 in the morning, the calm shattered. A creaking sound rose from the boarded-up window. Creak, creak, as if someone was pressing against the planks from outside. Minh's breath caught. The sound stopped, leaving only the whisper of wind. Then came the sigh. It wasn't his own, it was heavy, wet, ragged. as though pulled from a throat filled with blood. The lamp sputtered, flickered violently, and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Thump, thump, something heavy struck the walls. Slow and steady, Min's hands fumbled for a match, his heart slamming in his chest. When the match flared, he wished it hadn't. The mourning scarf hung from the window. It wasn't nailed, it had grown out of the wood itself. Its fabric pulsing like lungs. Threads unfurled, snaking across the wall. Soon, white strands pushed through cracks in the plaster, weaving together, stretching along the ceiling and floor, enclosing the room in a suffocating web. The scarf was building a cocoon around him. Minh stumbled to the door, clawing at the handle, but it was already bound tight with the same fabric. Sticky, unyielding, his nails tore, blood streaking the wood, but nothing gave way. The air grew colder. The smell of raw blood choked him. Above, the strands coiled together, shaping into something more, a hanging figure. A body dangled from the ceiling, swaying gently, its head bowed, wrapped tightly in the scarf. Face hidden. From deep within, a voice cracked the silence. "Here, no one escapes?" And then, the sharp snap of a neck breaking echoed through the sealed room. Chapter 17. The Bride's Laughter. After the night in the sealed room, Minh was no longer himself. His eyes were sunken, his hands shook constantly, and he avoided every reflective surface. Still, the suffocating presence lingered around him, as if the scarf had followed him out. That midnight, when the clock tolled 12, Minh sat rigidly on the bed. The storm outside had passed, but the silence inside was heavier than any thunder. His eyes drifted to the mirror hanging on the wall. He wished he hadn't looked. In the glass, his reflection was gone. Instead, a bride in a tattered white dress stood there. Her head was wrapped in a mourning scarf, the fabric hanging low, concealing her face. Wet, matted hair clung to her shoulders, dripping as though she had just climbed from a grave. Her pale hand rested lightly on his shoulder, though when Minh glanced sideways, no one was there. His skin crawled, his chest locked tight. Slowly, in the mirror, the bride lifted her head. Beneath the scarf, two hollow sockets stared at him, oozing fresh streams of blood that trickled down her ruined gown. Then her lips, cracked and red, curled into a grotesque smile. A shrill laugh erupted, high-pitched and piercing, filling the room. At first it was faint, but it swelled, echoing off the walls, scraping at Min's mind like knives. "Stop, stop," Minh screamed, covering his ears. But the laughter only grew louder, bouncing inside his skull. It mixed with sobs, a chorus of grief and madness, until it felt like his head would split apart. The lamp sputtered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Yet in the mirror, her hollow eyes still glowed faint red, her bloody smile widening, stretching impossibly. From that gaping maw came a whisper, intimate and venomous. "It's your turn to be my groom." Chapter 18. The Open Grave. After the night filled with the bride's piercing laughter, Minh nearly lost his sanity. He dared not touch mirrors, dared not close his eyes. For whenever he did, the words returned, "You will be my groom." 3 days later, the entire village stirred with fear. At the cemetery behind the old communal house, people discovered a fresh grave, newly dug. The soil was damp, the pit deep, but there was no coffin, no tombstone, no family in mourning. It was simply there, waiting. The villagers gathered, murmuring nervously. Some old men shook their heads, whispering about a spirit's grave, a hole the dead themselves opened to claim the living. None dared approach too close. When Minh heard, his blood ran cold. Deep inside, he knew the grave was for him. That night, Minh dreamed again. He found himself wandering through the cemetery, a fog curling thick around the mossy tombstones. The moon hung low, its light pale and sickly. In the center of the graveyard yawned the open grave, its black mouth gaped wide, the damp soil crumbling around its edges. From within rose the stench of rot, wet earth mixed with iron tang. The mourning scarf floated above the grave, drifting lazily in the cold air. Then it unfurled, long threads spilling downward, writhing like pale serpents. They slid across the ground, twining around Min's wrists and ankles. He fought, but the more he struggled, the tighter they bound. Inch by inch, they dragged him toward the grave. His nails tore, his voice cracked in desperate screams. but no sound carried in the fog. At the edge, the earth gave way. Minh toppled in, landing hard at the bottom of the pit. His body was bound fast, the scarf constricting like 100 snakes. Above, the shadow of the bride leaned over, her head wrapped in the white scarf, her empty sockets dripping blood that splashed onto Minh's face. From the abyss came the sound of funeral horns, shrill and mournful. Dirt began to fall, one clod at a time, landing heavily on Minh's chest. His throat, he thrashed, choking, as the grave filled, burying him alive. Through the suffocating soil, her voice reached him, hollow and triumphant. "Now you have a grave of your own." Minh awoke with a strangled scream. Drenched in sweat, his wrists and ankles burned. When he looked down, the marks were still there, red, raw, as though he had truly been bound. Chapter 19. The Third Death. The morning after Minh's nightmare of the open grave, another calamity struck the village. This time it was not family. Not someone close, yet still connected to him. Thou, a 17-year-old girl from the village, was found dead at the riverbank. Her body lay sprawled on the mud, her pale face frozen in a grotesque mask of terror. Her eyes were wide, but empty, two hollow sockets as if her very soul had been scooped out. Her mouth gaped, caught in an eternal scream. Around her neck was a mark. Not a rope, not a hand, a long, pale bruise in the shape of fabric, a mourning scarf's strangling embrace. The villagers gathered, whispering and trembling. One old woman muttered that she had seen Thou, the night before, accidentally brush against the scarf hanging in Minh's house. Every head turned toward Minh. Their eyes brimmed with fear, suspicion, and disgust. He felt their stares like daggers. Some murmured that the curse followed him, that anyone near him would be dragged into death. Minh's chest ached with guilt. He saw Thou's empty eyes in his mind, her young body pulled down by the unseen. His hands shook, clammy, as though her blood had soaked into his very skin. That night, unable to bear the whispers of the village, Minh locked himself in his room. But even through the shuttered windows, he could hear the cries from Thou's funeral, rising and falling like waves of sorrow. He pressed his palms against his ears, but the wail seeped in, drilling into his skull. Exhaustion pulled him into restless sleep. In his dream, Thou stood at his doorway. Her white-out dye was soaked, dripping river water, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were empty, her head wrapped in a blood-stained mourning scarf. Her voice was broken, bubbling with water as it forced its way out of her throat. "You dragged me down?" Minh jolted awake, screaming, his body soaked in sweat. But the nightmare had followed him into waking. From his window, a gust of icy wind swept in. The curtain billowed, and there, swaying gently in the draft, hung the mourning scarf. It dripped water, puddling on the floor. Chapter 20. White cloth in the wind. After Thou's death, Minh became a pariah in the village. No one dared come near him. People whispered that he was cursed, chosen by the bride's mourning scarf, and that anyone who touched his life would pay with their own. Even children avoided his path, hiding behind their mother's skirts when he passed. He shut himself away, trying to bury himself in the silence of his apartment. But the scarf did not let him be. It appeared everywhere. One rainy afternoon, Minh rode the bus back from town. He sat slumped at the back, staring dully through the foggy window. Raindrops streaked down the glass, blurring the outside world. Then, in a flash of lightning, he saw it. A strip of white cloth draped across the empty seat in front of him. He blinked. No one else reacted. The fabric twitched, dark drops falling from it, drops that gleamed red before vanishing into the floor. Minh shuddered, gripping the seat until his knuckles went white. Another time, at university, Minh tried to force his mind back into routine. He opened his notebook, but between the pages lay a torn strip of white fabric, its edge soaked with dried blood. He gasped, yanking it free, but when a classmate bent down to pick it up, it was nothing but a crumpled blank sheet of paper. That night, Minh opened the window to breathe. The city sprawled before him, quiet and indifferent, but his heart stopped when his gaze drifted upward. On the 7th floor of the building opposite, in the yellow glow of a single light, a mourning scarf hung, swaying in the wind. It didn't flap wildly like cloth caught in a storm. No, its movements were slow, deliberate, as if someone in the dark room beyond was nodding their head. Minh blinked, and the window went dark. The scarf was still there, drifting gently. He slammed his own window shut, trembling, but behind him, in his room, the curtains swayed though the air was still. And between them, hanging quietly, was another mourning scarf, streaked with blood. It swayed as though draped over an invisible figure. Watching him, Minh bolted into the hall. But what he saw there froze his blood. Every railing, every doorknob, every shadow along the corridor, all of them were draped with white scarves. They fluttered together in the stale air, rustling in unison, like the weeping of 100 unseen mourners. Minh collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. Among the whispers of fabric came a voice, soft and final, carried by the wind. Everywhere is mourning. You are already mine. Chapter 21. The Wedding of Blood. That night, Minh collapsed at his desk, his body trembling, his face pale and hollow. He no longer knew if he was awake or dreaming. Reality and nightmare had already become one. Around midnight, a sound broke the silence. Boom, boom, boom. Drums, heavy, slow, pounding like a heartbeat. The sound shook the air, rattling Minh's bones. Then came the sharp, shrill wail of horns, spiraling endlessly like funeral cries. When Minh opened his eyes, he was no longer in his apartment. He stood in a vast hall, its walls shrouded in a mist red as blood. Thousands of white lanterns hung from the ceiling, each swaying faintly, their light dim and sickly. Around him sat rows upon rows of figures, all dressed in mourning clothes, heads covered with scarves. Their faces were blank, featureless voids. Down the center stretched a long carpet, not white, not red, but the dark, clotted color of blood. It led to a coffin set upon an altar, its lid slightly ajar. The drums thundered louder. From the far end of the hall, a procession appeared. People marched slowly, each carrying candles that burned with a ghostly, wavering flame. At their center walked a bride. Her gown was once white, now torn and smeared with dried blood. Her head was bound tight with a mourning scarf, her face completely hidden, her steps dragged, heavy, each one echoing like chains scraping stone. Minh's body locked. He tried to move, to run, but his legs were rooted to the ground. The bride stopped before him. A hand, pale and ice cold, reached out and seized his. The grip was iron, unbreakable. Around them, the faceless crowd began to chant in unison. The drums and horns merged into one cacophony, deafening and suffocating. Then the bride lifted her scarf. Minh's scream stuck in his throat. Beneath the fabric was his own face, dead white, blood dripping from hollow eyes, lips twisted into a grotesque grin. The crowd raised their heads. Every mourner in the hall now bore Minh's face, each one staring at him, each one grinning with bloodied mouths. The bride leaned close, her icy breath searing his ear, her voice sweet yet venomous. From now on, you are my husband. The coffin lid creaked open. A massive mourning scarf burst forth, its folds spreading like wings, wrapping around Minh, pulling him down into suffocating darkness. Chapter 22. The White Hand. After the nightmare wedding, Minh woke with his body drenched in sweat, his breath ragged, his eyes bloodshot. But the horror of the dream had not left him. It clung to the air of his apartment, thick and suffocating. When he finally lit the lamp, he froze. On every wall, across the ceiling, and even the floor were smeared bloody handprints. Some were small, like those of children. Others were long, skeletal, twisted grotesquely. Layer upon layer, they covered the room entirely, as though hundreds of hands had reached out from the dark. Minh stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. Then the handprints began to move. From each crimson smear, strands of white threads pushed outward, writhing, slithering, spreading like roots of a tree. They twined together, weaving into a dense net, until the entire room became cocooned in a suffocating web of mourning cloth. The lamp flickered once, then went out. In the dark, a sound rose, swish, 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 fabric scraping bone. Then, from the ceiling, a pale white hand slid down. Its fingers were impossibly long, the tips sharp like hooks. It groped blindly through the air, twitching as though searching for prey. Minh dropped to the floor, scrambling beneath the bed. But there, too, the horror awaited. From the shadows beneath the frame, dozens of white hands stretched out, clawing toward him. Their touch was icy, their nails digging into the floor with screeching sounds. He burst out from under the bed, clawing at the door, but the handle was already wrapped in white fabric, sticky and unyielding, fused into the wood like veins. His chest heaved, panic choking him. Then came the sound of weeping, soft, mournful, echoing from the fabric itself. It swelled, turning into shrill laughter that pierced his skull. And from the center of the room, she emerged, the bride in the mourning scarf. Her pale hands dragged the endless white cloth behind her. Her head bowed, the scarf concealing her hollow, bleeding eyes. She raised one hand, impossibly long fingers curling, and pressed it against Min's chest. The cold pierced his skin, his ribs, his heart. He convulsed as pain seared through him, leaving behind white imprints shaped like skeletal fingers. Blood trickled down, staining his shirt. Her voice rang in his ears, cruel and final. "You are marked." Chapter 23. The Call from the Grave. The rain poured relentlessly that night, beating against the rooftops, the wind shrieking through the bamboo like voices in mourning. Min curled up on his bed, his body feverish, his chest still burning where the white hand had marked him. Every time he touched the bruises, it felt as though fire licked his veins. At midnight, he heard it, a voice. At first, it was faint, like the sigh of wind, but soon it grew clearer, heavier, echoing deep in his skull. Min, Min. The sound came not from outside, nor from inside the house. It came from somewhere deeper, from the cemetery. Min tried to resist, pressing his hands over his ears, but the call burrowed into his bones. His body moved as though pulled by invisible strings. He staggered out into the night. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, the mist rolling thick across the ground. Step by step, he walked the familiar path to the graveyard. The air there was colder, thick with fog. Tombstones loomed in the shadows, mossy and crooked, like silent watchers bowing their heads. And in the center of the cemetery, he saw it, the mourning scarf, floating in the air. Its threads dangled like tendrils, dripping with crimson droplets that splattered onto the soil. The cloth writhed, twisting into the shape of a woman. Soon, the bride in white stood before him, her head bowed, her face hidden beneath the scarf. From her hollow sockets glowed faint, bloody light. The earth split open beneath her feet, revealing a freshly dug grave. Black and gaping, the stench of decay and wet soil rose, suffocating Min. He looked down, and terror seized him. White threads had coiled around his ankles, binding him. They tightened, pulling him toward the grave. Min screamed, thrashing desperately, but the fog swallowed his voice. The ground crumbled beneath him, sucking him closer to the abyss. The bride raised her head slowly. Blood poured from her hollow sockets, staining her ruined gown. Her voice thundered through the night, echoing from the soil, from the tombstones, from within his chest. "You are the one I've chosen. Come down with me." The earth gave way. Min toppled forward, the grave yawning wide, waiting. From the pit rose the sound of drums and horns, a funeral march for one soul alone. The cemetery became a vast funeral ground, and Min the sole mourner. Chapter 24. The Fourth Death. After that night in the cemetery, Min's strength waned. He lay weak in his room, his wrists and ankles still raw with deep red welts where the scarf had bound him. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt himself sinking into that open grave. The next morning, news spread like wildfire through the village. Another death. This time it was Tam, an old friend of Min's who had often visited him, offering companionship despite the whispers. They found him kneeling in his kitchen. His hands were clasped as though in prayer, but his head hung grotesquely forward. Around his neck was wrapped a white mourning scarf, tight enough to leave his face swollen, his eyes bulging, his tongue protruded, purple and stiff. Those who entered the house swore they heard the steady beat of funeral drums echoing from nowhere, vibrating through the walls. Each beat made the scarf around Tam's neck tremble, as though an unseen hand was striking it in rhythm. His family wailed, but no one dared touch the body. It was only when an old village priest arrived, trembling and chanting, that the scarf was removed. Yet even then, horror followed. As soon as it loosened, the scarf slithered from Tam's neck, fell to the floor, and crawled away like a serpent, vanishing into the shadows. Panic tore through the crowd. People fled, muttering that the curse had claimed another life, and that Min's connection to it was undeniable. That night, Minh barred his door, shivering in the dim lamplight. But when the silence deepened, he heard weeping again, this time inside his apartment. He turned slowly. The mourning scarf hung suspended in the middle of the room. But it wasn't still. The cloth twisted, folding, until it formed the shape of a kneeling man, just like Tam's corpse. The figure quivered, and from within the fabric came a sob, broken and hateful. Minh clutched his head, tears burning his eyes, but no matter how tightly he pressed his hands to his ears, the voice bled through, echoing inside his skull. More will die until you wear it yourself. Chapter 25. The Blood Oath. That night, Minh sat trembling before his grandmother's old altar. The scarf had just mocked him with the shape of Tam's death. And now silence pressed against his ears like stone. In desperation, Minh opened the wooden chest that had belonged to his grandmother. Inside, beneath yellowed blankets, he found a worn journal. Its cover cracked, its pages brittle and stained with age. He lit a lamp and began to read. His grandmother's handwriting was shaky but clear. This mourning scarf, it is not a common cloth. It feeds on blood. It feeds on lives. It cannot be destroyed. Minh flipped the pages, his hands sweating. His grandmother wrote of how, even as a child, she had seen the scarf tremble on the altar whenever someone in the family died. Whenever it moved, another death always followed. We tried burning it, burying it, locking it away, but always, it returned, cold, damp, as if it had just risen from a grave. The last pages were smeared with brown stains, unmistakably dried blood. The handwriting slanted wildly. There is no way to end it, only one thing. Someone must wear it, and die, only then will the curse pause. The journal slipped from Minh's trembling hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. His throat tightened, and sweat drenched his face. On the walls, the lamplight flickered, casting shadows that looked like streams of blood running down. A sobbing voice rose behind him. Minh spun around. The scarf hung from the altar, swaying gently, as though laughing at him. "Take me then," Minh screamed, his voice hoarse. "If you want my life, take it." He seized the scarf. It was icy, wet, rigid like metal. The moment his skin touched it, countless voices poured into his head, infants wailing, women shrieking, men gasping their final breaths. The cacophony drilled into his skull until he thought he would split apart. The scarf tightened around his wrist. Blood seeped from his palm, dripping onto the fabric. At once, the cloth convulsed, swelling, drinking in his blood hungrily like a starving beast. Minh collapsed to his knees, his vision spinning. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flicker, his grandmother's face, pale and weeping, shimmering in the corner of the room. Her cracked voice whispered, "Do not let it bind you. Do not repeat the blood oath of our family." Her image dissolved, leaving emptiness. The scarf fell from his wrist to the floor. Writhing, it crawled to the fallen journal, coiled around it, and squeezed. Blood seeped from the pages, spreading until every word was drowned in red. The lamp went out with a hiss. In the darkness, voices chanted, overlapping, endless. Blood for life, life for mourning? Chapter 26. The Night of Binding. After reading his grandmother's blood-soaked journal, Minh realized he had no choice left. Either die, or try to trap the cursed scarf. Desperation clawed at him, so he sought the help of Old Man Hack once more. The old man listened in silence, his wrinkled face drawn tight with fear. Finally, he nodded weakly. "It has drunk your blood. It cannot be banished, but perhaps it can be bound. Only for a time." That night, Old Man Hack led Minh to the abandoned communal hall at the edge of the village. The roof sagged, the walls mottled with mold, the air thick with mildew and rot. Rats scurried across the beams, their claws scratching in the silence. By lamplight, the old man laid out his ritual: jars of rice, bowls of water, strips of red cloth, and 4 candles at the corners of the hall. At the center, he placed a large clay urn. "Put the scarf inside," he ordered. With shaking hands, Minh dropped the mourning scarf into the urn. At once, the hall trembled. The flames of the candles surged high, then guttered low, flickering as though choking. A rank odor of blood filled the room. Old Man Hack began chanting. His cracked voice rose and fell like the toll of a funeral bell. Minh knelt opposite, clutching his chest as terror coiled in his veins. The scarf stirred, the urn rattled violently. A piercing wail erupted, the cry of a woman dragged from her grave. The sound shook the beams, dust raining from the ceiling. Then it burst free. The scarf exploded from the urn, unfurling in the air. Its folds twisted, stretched, and shaped themselves into the form of a bride. Her gown hung in tatters, soaked in blood. Her head was bound in white cloth, from beneath which 2 streams of blood poured from hollow eyes. Her shrill laughter filled the hall. The old man flung rice and strips of red cloth, his voice rising louder, faster. The threads wrapped around her, trying to bind her figure. But the bride screamed, her voice sharp as broken glass, and the bindings snapped like paper. The candles died. Darkness collapsed. From the floor, pale hands erupted, clawing at Min's ankles, pulling him down. He thrashed, crying out, but the hands were cold as iron. Beside him, Old Man Hack gasped. Min turned and saw the scarf whip through the dark, lashing around the old man's throat. His body convulsed as the cloth tightened. There was a sickening crack. His head jerked sideways at an unnatural angle, his eyes bulging in terror as his lifeless body crumpled. Min screamed, but the voice that answered was not human. It whispered in his ear, echoing from every corner of the blackened hall. "This binding is nothing. This hall will be your grave." Chapter 27. The Night of Blood in the Communal Hall. Darkness thickened inside the communal hall like spilled ink, suffocating and absolute. The funeral drums thundered, their rhythm pounding in Min's skull. Horns shrieked in chaotic wails, the sound of mourning twisting into madness. Min stumbled backward, but pale, skeletal hands shot from the floor, clutching his legs. Their nails pierced his flesh, drawing blood that dripped onto the cracked tiles. He screamed, clawing at the ground, but the more he struggled, the tighter they held. At the center of the hall stood the bride in white. Her gown flared around her like torn wings, drenched in blood, her head bowed, scarf soaked and sagging, blood streaming endlessly from the hollow sockets beneath. Her lips stretched into a grin, grotesque and dripping red. Old Man Hack tried to fight back, his voice trembling as he chanted, clutching a cracked rosary. But the scarf coiled around his throat, lifted him off the ground, and twisted. Snap! His neck broke, his body collapsed in a heap, eyes wide in frozen terror. Min's scream died in his chest. His heart hammered violently, the cold gnawing through his bones. The scarf slithered across the blood-stained floor, dragging behind it a trail of red. It crawled toward Min, each fold twitching like the bodies of white serpents. It lashed upward, binding his ankles, dragging him across the tiles. He thrashed wildly, fingers clawing at the floor, nails ripping free and leaving streaks of blood. The coffin in the middle of the hall creaked open, its lid swinging like the jaw of a beast. Inside yawned not wood, not flesh, but a black abyss. The bride leaned over it, her hollow gaze fixed on him, her smile widening. Her voice was a chorus of whispers and screams, shrill and broken. "Your blood will be the dowry." The hands from the floor pulled harder, dragging him closer. The scarf tightened around his chest, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Min's vision swam as he was dragged to the coffin's edge. He stared into the abyss, his reflection staring back, a corpse wrapped in white, a scarf bound tight around his head. The bride laughed, a sound sharp and piercing, echoing through the rafters. The coffin lid swung wider, and the abyss swallowed him. Chapter 28. The Empty Coffin. The scarf dragged Min mercilessly across the hall, his body leaving a crimson trail across the cracked tiles. His hands clawed desperately at the floor, nails breaking, but the pull was unstoppable. The coffin loomed ahead, its lid yawning wide, but instead of a corpse within, there was only darkness, a void so deep it seemed bottomless. From inside, a freezing wind rose, reeking of wet soil and rotting flesh. Min kicked and screamed, but the scarf had already coiled around his torso, his neck, tightening until his breaths came in shallow gasps. Then he saw them. From within the coffin, countless pale hands reached out. Their fingers were long, bony, with jagged nails. They clawed at his skin, tearing at his arms and shoulders, pulling him down into the abyss. Blood streamed from the wounds, soaking his shirt. Above him, the bride in white stood at the coffin's edge. Her gown was shredded, dripping scarlet. Her hollow sockets bled endlessly, yet her twisted lips stretched wider. trembling with delight. The horns wailed, the drums boomed, the coffin shuddered with each beat, as though it were alive. The scarf around Min's neck constricted. His vision blurred, the world spinning. He thrashed, nails ripping against the wooden edge. But the abyss pulled harder. Hungrily. In the chaos, he glimpsed a shifting illusion. The hall dissolved, replaced by a wedding procession. Hundreds of mourners in white lined the path. Their heads bowed, their faceless voids turned toward him. They clapped in rhythm with the drums, chanting. The bride leaned closer. Her cold hand caressed his cheek, her breath icy on his skin. From now on, we share the grave. The hands yanked. Min fell. Darkness swallowed him whole. The coffin lid slammed shut. Silence followed. The drums ceased. The horns cut off mid-wail. Only his heartbeat remained, fading, faltering, until it stopped. Chapter 29. The knocking inside the coffin. Darkness enveloped Min, thick and suffocating, pressing against his chest. The stench of rotting wood and damp earth filled his lungs. He could not tell where his body ended and the void began. Panic surged. He thrashed wildly, his fists pounding against the coffin lid above him. Thump, thump, thump. The sound reverberated, but no one answered. His screams tore his throat raw, swallowed whole by the suffocating dark. Then it came. Knock, knock, knock. The sound tapped back, deliberate, mocking. Min froze, his breath catching in his throat. His fists trembled against the wood. The knocking grew louder, shifting into scratching. Long nails screeched across the coffin walls. Peeling splinters, cracks split open, and from them oozed thick, fresh blood, dripping onto Min's face, soaking his shirt. The scarf tightened around his throat, cutting off his air. His vision swam, spots bursting before his eyes. And then, a voice whispered, no longer from outside, but from inside the coffin itself. You thought someone would hear you? This is your home now. The wood convulsed. From the cracks, pale hands thrust inward, bony fingers hooking into his flesh. They tore at his skin, leaving bloody streaks as they pulled, dragged, consumed. Min's scream was choked by the scarf constricting his neck. Each beat of a distant funeral drum made the cloth cinch tighter, ribs cracking under the pressure. From the darkness before him, the bride's face emerged. Her scarf hid everything but her mouth, a gaping, crimson maw stretched into a grotesque grin. She leaned close, her bloody breath filling his lungs. Knock, knock, knock. The sound returned, but this time, it wasn't from the coffin walls. It came from his own hands. Min looked down in horror. His fists moved on their own, rhythmically knocking, as though welcoming another soul inside. Chapter 30. The Wedding of Mourning. Inside the suffocating darkness, Min no longer felt his own body. Only the echo of drums remained, pounding like a heart that refused to die. But soon, the horns rose, sharp, shrill, merging with the drums into a twisted symphony of both wedding and funeral. When Min opened his eyes, he was no longer in the coffin. He stood in the middle of a vast courtyard bathed in crimson moonlight. The air reeked of incense and decay. Around him, rows of mourners in white sat silently, their heads wrapped in scarves, their faces black voids. At the center stood a wedding palanquin, draped not in flowers, but in bones and blood-stained cloth. From every corner, faceless guests wept and laughed at once, their voices clashing like madness. A cold hand touched Min's shoulder. He turned, and there she was, the bride in the mourning scarf. Her wedding gown hung in tatters, soaked with blood. From beneath the scarf, her hollow sockets oozed streams of red, yet her cracked lips curved into a grotesque smile. Her voice, sweet yet venomous, pierced him. The day of our wedding has come. Min's knees buckled, but two mourners stepped forward, faceless and silent, forcing him to kneel. A new scarf descended from above, wrapping tightly around his forehead, squeezing until he gasped for air. The drums thundered, the horns shrieked, the crowd chanted in unison. Wed, wed, wed? The coffin was brought forward, its lid opening with a groan. Inside lay a skeleton clad in a bridal gown, clutching a bouquet of rotten flowers. The bride stepped into the coffin, her icy hand pulling Min down beside her. He struggled, but hundreds of pale hands rose from the ground, seizing him, dragging him into the coffin. The lid slammed shut. From the darkness, her breath caressed his ear. From now on, you are my groom. Forever, we shall share the grave. Above, the crimson moon flickered, then vanished. Darkness consumed the courtyard. The drums stopped, the horns silenced. Only the echo of a wedding song remained, low, broken, mourning, rising from beneath the earth, carrying the laughter of the dead bride.